Hello everyone, this is FDL and I'm bringing you a different episode this time. I'm actually going to feature my top 10 enablers or top 10 favorite enablers and exciting cards from Shattered Fates. There are a lot of cards to talk about, but I'm just going to focus on the 10s that I think either empower or enable empower old strategies or enable new strategies that I think are interesting. We also get to see the new Shadow Era logging screen, which is pretty epic. And this soundtrack is pretty neat too. I usually don't play with the music on Shadow Era, but this one is worth a listen. It's not that I don't like the music that's in Shadow Era, but I just don't play with music in a lot of games usually. Yeah, and we get to see this dude who's Yarl Shield Bearer. In the Shield Bearer art you can't see the dragon, but it's still a pretty nice piece. And the depth and snow here is pretty cool. So yeah, Shadow Era is moving along. And so yeah, we're getting nearer, I guess, to Shattered Fate's release. And it's getting more stable in terms of balancing and bugs, and it's even starting to get a decent amount of art. So yeah, without further ado, I'll just jump right in my my top 10 cards to look out for. If you've been playing Shattered Fates, you've probably been, I mean, you've seen those cards. Yeah, so I'm starting with Yarl Bladedancer, which you might notice it's just it's a Poo and a 2/3 for 2. But this time it's a warrior ally and also a Yarl. Actually, this gives Shadow access to its first Pooin. But the important part is Bladedancer's ability. So for, well, actually it's free, but you need to activate it. You can exhaust Yarl Bladedancer and transfer its attack onto another ally. So my favorite use for this guy is with hasted allies, where you can get your hasted guy in and then transfer Yarl's attack on the hasted guy and get a kill. Because hasted allies usually have lower attacks than their non-hasted counterpart. So yeah, Yarl allows you to make very good use of them. Bladedancer is also very good with protectors and the new protector hero Tala. But yeah, basically if you have this guy behind and Aeon can attack for 5 every turn at least. He also transfers any bonuses he gets, so if you have Alden out and Bladedancer, well, Bladedancer will now have 3 attack, and he can give those 3 points of attack to Alden. So yeah, I expect to see a lot of Bladedancers in Shattered Fates. A very neat card and allows for some very nice play. Moving on, I picked Twilight Eidolon to represent the Twilight tribe. Actually, tribes are a bigger thing now in Shattered Fates. They get fleshed out a lot, mostly undeads and Twilights, but also what's their name? The Eunaxio guys, Templars. But Twilights are a tribe that like dying, so they're either fragile or suicidal or benefit from the deaths of friendly Twilights. And Twilight Eidolon, which is an artifact that costs 3. First of all, it allows you to draw a card if you control 2 or more Twilights. So this alone is pretty good. But also, if you have a Twilight die while Eidolon is on the play, you actually sacrifice Eidolon and put the ally back on the field. So, which is pretty neat because you actually get to trigger undead effects from the dying ally. So some of the Twilights benefit from that, but you also get the board presence back. So yeah, Eidolon, it will almost, I mean, you almost play it you always play it with 2 allies on the field almost. So it cantrips, and then it reduces the value of your opponent's removal. So yeah, it's pretty neat. It holds the tribe together, and the Twilight tribe can be played in a variety of shells, from rush to control. So yeah, once again, you can expect to see a lot of Eidolon and a lot of Twilights as Shattered Fates comes along. Number 8, I picked Hunter's Gambit. Hunters do get some nice tricks in Shattered Fates, but none will be more prevalent than the Gambit. So it's an attachment that costs 2 and reduces the health of an ally by 1. And when Gambit goes to the graveyard, you get to draw 2 cards. So if the ally this was attached to dies, you draw 2 cards. Or if Gambit is removed by attachment hate, you also get to draw 2 cards. So yeah, it's pretty neat. Well, what it does is it basically puts Victor back on the map. Victor's ability allows you to recurse a Hunter ability from your graveyard and put an ally on 1 HP. So I think you can see the synergy here. And Victor has always been held back by some very bad draw power, and Gambit also takes care of that. With that being said, it's also very viable in, say, a Baduru deck or a Banebow even. I guess Gwen could play it, but I haven't seen a lot of Gwens and I don't play her myself. Even Skervox, the new Hunter hero, I mean, basically anyone can play Hunter's Gambit. So yeah, very nice card, very interesting card. Next I picked a Priest card, the Glass Chalice of Knowing. It's a 2-cost artifact that allows you to, for the cost of 2 Shadow Energy, pick the bottom 3 cards of your deck, put them into your hand, and shuffle. Well, you have to shuffle 2 back in your deck. So you actually get to draw 1 card for 2, but you get to pick that card out of 3 cards. I absolutely love that card. It's probably one of my favorites from Shattered Fates. Priests get a lot of new toys too, and they're great at control as well, actually they're pretty much only great at control. They still can't rush, but I mean, this deck filtering in control is very interesting. It allows you to always have the right tool at the right time for the particular situation you're facing. Whether it's spot removal, a certain ally, or a board wipe, or a King's Pride. Yeah, the filtering is very nice. I mean, you can make an argument for Wizened Staff versus Glass Chalice. I mean, Wizened Staff, you probably remember, it's a 4-cost weapon that has 1 attack and 4 durability and allows you to draw a card for 1 Shadow Energy. So it's actually twice as efficient in terms of draw power. But I like the filtering a lot, and I think the trade-off is worth it. You get a little less card, but you get the right card most of the time, or more often at least. And it's also a little harder to remove than Wizened Staff. I mean, most of the item destruction that can target Glass Chalice can also target Wizened Staff. But Glass Chalice cannot be beaten down by allies or such means. But I'm not saying Wizened Staff is a bad card, it's still a very good card. But for me, Chalice is very fun and very nice, and it, I mean, forces you to make some decision, and you can draw at different times in your turn too. So yeah, probably the most important thing is that you actually get to draw twice by turn 4 if you're going second, or twice by turn 5 if you're going first. Yeah, coupled with Priest's very good draw power and board control, it's very interesting. I love it. Okay, moving on into the top half. Well, I picked Bone King, but it's probably the undead you're gonna see the least of. But overall, the undead tribe is very nice, very well fleshed out. It has a couple of teams going. Sometimes you want allies in your graveyard. Sometimes you get very resilient threats that bounce back to your hand, like Durkan. So Durkan is a 3/4 for 4 that deals ice damage, and when he's killed and he's the only ally you have on the board, he bounces back to your hand. So you basically have an infinite supply of this guy. But he also has an unsummon ability. So if you have 3 undead allies in your graveyard, he comes in and pings for 2, which is absolutely great and works with a lot of shadow heroes. So like Twilight, undeads, they work in a variety of shells, and with a lot of the shadow heroes, that either those that have direct damage ability or weapons like Baduru. So yeah, Bone King, I mean, I'd like to break this guy, and it feels like a very good card. It's a little underwhelming, but it's, I don't know, it's just the perfect mix of abilities for me. And yeah, I hope to play a lot of him. Speaking of undeads, Bone Sabre is a pretty cool new weapon. It's a 1/4 for 5, but the main thing is its ability. First of all, it has ambush, but most importantly, it when you hit someone with Bone Sabre and they take damage, your highest attack undead will come in at the end of combat and hit the ally you just attacked. So what that means is, if you have, let's say, a Shadow Knight on the board and you attack a Raven with Bone Sabre, you'll get 1 damage in, and since it has ambush, you won't get retaliation. And then Shadow Knight will come in and finish the 6 HP ally, 6 HP Raven. The important thing to note is that the ally will attack if it is able. So that means as long as it's not disabled, it will attack. So even if it's exhausted, you'll get an attack. So you can actually get 2 attacks from the same ally with Bone Sabre. Well, I mean, you get the regular attack and the Bone Sabre triggered attack. And also, I mean, if something is gonna put Gravebone back on the map, I think it's Bone Sabre. That means that you can, on turn 5, you can summon a big ally from the grave, which is now easier to get because we have a lot of discard effects now in Shattered Fates. So you get a big guy in the grave, you summon him back with well, you don't summon him actually, but you bring him back from the graveyard with Gravebone. You play your Bone Sabre, and you get to deal 6 damage to an ally on that turn. So Gravebone has been lacking board control, and Bone Sabre might give him back. And yeah, it's I love playing that Gravebone deck, that Bone Sabre Gravebone. It leads to some pretty awesome plays. It's also a hunter card, so someone like Baduru can make some pretty good use of that too, by playing, let's say, Shadow Knight on turn 5 and Bone Sabre. So you get to draw from Shadow Knight and get to deal 6 damage to an ally, and then you get double strike from Shadow Knight for 2 turns. Because actually you need to take note that since Bone Sabre's effect triggers at the end of combat, if you hit for the 4th durability, Bone Sabre will be destroyed before the end of combat, so you don't get the free attack from it. It also doesn't work on defense, but the trick is to get board control and then force your opponent to only play 1 ally per turn and keep the board control with Sabre and your big undead guy. Okay, so moving on up, we have another 5-cost weapon, and it's Thoughtripper Cutlass. I mean, this is the card that has caught my eye since Shattered Fate was spoiled. It's a 2/3 for 5, but if you manage to kill someone in combat while you have Thoughtripper Cutlass out, the dead ally's controller discards a card from their hand at random. So that's not exactly a new effect. I mean, it's kind of like Serena's effects, where you force your opponents to discard from their hand. But I mean, it's much more you can get a lot more triggers out of Cutlass than Serena's. Actually, the best hero to use Cutlass is probably Garth, the new rogue heroes that allows you to double the damage you deal to an ally. So you get a lot of kills from Cutlass. And what this changes, I mean, when you're facing a hero, well, actually it's just rogues that can have access to Cutlass, you have to approach your sacrifices differently. So far, hands have been pretty safe in Shadow Era. It's rare that you get a discard. Only Serena would do it with some consistency, but she was nowhere to be seen really. But now Garth with Cutlass would probably a little more prevalent. But yeah, it forces you as a player to play differently, and you don't get the automatic sacrifices from your doubles and triples that you get in your early starting hand. Note that it doesn't need to be killed by the Cutlass damage. So say if you have a Black Garb and the Black Garb kills the ally, you're still gonna force a discard. So yeah, some people might think it's a bit annoying to lose cards from your hand, but I like that it forces you to approach the game differently, and variety in playstyles is pretty nice. So I like Cutlass, and I think we'll be seeing a lot of it. And I mean, I guess as new sets are released and you get better discard strategies, it might get even more played. But yeah, so far I like it, and be prepared for it, and you better have a plan for Cutlass if you're playing a rogue. I think we're moving on to the top 3 now. Yeah, number 3 I put Confluence of Fate, which is a new neutral 2-cost attachment that allows you to draw a card for every attachment you summoned in a turn, to a maximum of 2. What I mean is that what that means is that actually, well, it cantrips when you play it because it counts itself, and for every crippling blow or enrage or Zealzimd or whatever attachment you play, you get to draw a card at the end of your turn. It also has a new mechanism, Sustain. Sustain is a cost that you must pay at the end of your turn. If you don't pay, you don't have a choice, you have to pay it, but if you're not able to pay it, the card will be destroyed. In this case it's a hit point, so I mean, if you can't pay it, that's because you're dead. But sometimes it's a resource cost, so if you can't pay the or a shadow energy cost, so if you can't pay the cost, you lose the card. But in this case, yeah, it's HP. So Confluence allows a lot of new decks. Obviously, they're going to be attachment centered, and yeah, attachments have had the weakness of usually being at best a 1-for-1 and for defensive attachments, but offensive attachments have usually been, you know, when you buff an ally with an attachment, you set yourself up for a 2-for-1, and that's a very steep price to pay. So Confluence changes that by turning all your attachments into cantrips, and it's also a pretty good draw engine. I mean, if you can play 2 attachments and draw 2 cards a turn, there's not a lot of cards in Shadow Era right now that allow you this kind of draw power. Imagine when you play turn 2 Confluence of Fate, you draw a card, and you play turn 3 Blood Frenzy, you draw a card off of it, and draw 2 cards before the start of your next turn. Warriors can have a lot of... actually, there's a new Shadow Warrior that's called Vess, and that has an ability that reduces the cost of attachment plate, and I mean, it's my favorite Confluence deck so far. You can actually easily draw 4 cards a turn with Vess. I play a very controlled defensive Vess centered on crippling blows and other and spiked bullet strike, the new control attachments for a warrior. So yeah, you obviously need some kind of healing in that deck, and there are a lot of attachments that happen to heal you, like Enrage, Rampage, and Medal of Yari. So that's a very cool deck that I like playing in Shattered Fates. But you also have Solo Jericho. I don't know if you ever thought you'd hear that, but Jericho has some means to go offensive now, and Confluence of Fate is very good for in that shell. What else? You can even go with, I mean, rogues have a lot of cantripping attachments that are like Backstab and Silent Strike. You probably don't need Confluence in that deck, but I've tried it, and it's pretty neat. You get a lot of card draw and a lot of incremental advantage out of those small attachments and Confluence. So the good thing about the Confluence decks is that they run so many attachments that they usually don't care about attachment hate. So yeah, they're pretty nice decks, and a new, I guess it's a new archetype, you could say. We haven't had those in the Shadow Era so far. Okay, at number 2, have Brimstone Devourer. He's not very spectacular as a 2/4 for 3, but he's the poster boy for discard strategies. So, because when Brimstone is discarded from either your hand or the top of your deck, the ally with the lowest health takes 3 fire damage. If your opponent doesn't have an ally, it's the hero that will take 3 damage. So usually discarding a card is a cost. I mean, you get a nice effect because you pay the cost of discarding a card. But when that card you discard is Brimstone Devourer, it's actually a pretty nice effect that you get from your discard. So and Shattered Fates brings us a number of new discard outlets, from Cultist to Living Armor. It also makes antimatter pretty good. So it's mostly Shadow that are gonna play those discard builds. And Brimstone for me is the card that holds them together. Because they draw a lot, but if they were just drawing, it wouldn't be that bad. But the fact that they can draw and get some value out of extra value out of the resource they spend drawing, well, that's very relevant. So expect to see a lot of discard decks, mostly Zaladars, but also Elementalists and Praxis. So it's mostly centered around elementals because of antimatter, but yeah, Brimstone Devourer, a card to watch for. It's unspectacular, but in the right build, it's very key. And last but not least, you have probably another unspectacular looking card, but it's probably generated the biggest amount of controversy and forum posts since it was spoiled. But Aramia, which is the new human mage hero. So for 3 Shadow Energy, Aramia can look through her deck and put an item that costs 3 or less into play. Just like that, it doesn't look that that impressive. But just for the fact that it's the first tutor effect for Shadow Era is pretty neat. So just this alone allows you for some very different deck building philosophy. I mean, you don't need 3 or 4 copies of your key cards, because I mean there's a great consistency with Aramia on turns 3 or 4, depending if you went first or second. You can get the item you want every time. For example, it can be a Thoughtful Investment, so that you can get a lone copy of Thoughtful Investment in your deck and get it every turn on turn 3 to get your resource acceleration. But yeah, that's not really why Aramia is controversial actually, and she has a very nice Twilight build. I mean, I talked about Twilight Eidolon. She can get it for I mean, on a consistent basis on turn 3, so she gets a card out of it and protects one of her Twilights. But the Aramia build is the the Wisp, the Homunculus Wisp deck, which allows her to grow a small threat very big, very fast. I mean, you'll you'll see it when you if you've followed Shadow Fates a bit on the forums, or you've been playing a bit, you've seen those Wisp deck that can attack for 6 on turn 4, or actually 8 I think now on turn 4 if you get the right draw. And if you get the right draw, you can basically win on turn 4 or 5 with a huge guy behind the protector. So yeah, but Aramia opens up a lot of possibilities in deck building with the consistency that she provides, and the fact that you can have a lot of either singles or 2 copies of certain cards that you want to use in some matchups, maybe not in others. So you can have some situational answers and not lose too many card slots to situational answers. So yeah, so that was my 10 cards to look out for Shadowed Fates. I left out a lot of good stuff, and I also left out a lot of old cards that are now more relevant than ever. But if you want to chime in, please do, either on the channel or on the Shadow Era forums, and I'll be happy to continue the discussion. So yeah, that was my top 10, and I hope to hear from you guys. So until next time, bye bye.